all that little technology ready.
I know, and I'm gonna turn the big lights off.
Now, the amusing thing is, probably out of all of our sisters, people would have expected that I would use the projector more than anybody else. However, Margaret asked me yesterday, and I said, oh no, I'm not using it. You're not? Then I remembered we were taping for Marion, and I thought, oh Lord have mercy, I don't want that camera on me 100% of the time. So I now do have a PowerPoint presentation to give you, so you can direct your eyes to other places. So the unfortunate part is, I always help people do these things, but typically I've not done it myself, so we'll see how this all works out. So when we first started talking about Servants of Mary and Servites, Father John Fantana came and visited us from Chicago, and he's a tough act to follow. He certainly had a whole lot of material. I'm just really glad that a couple weeks have gone by since then, so hopefully our memories are a little shy of what he actually originally shared. The title for today, as Margaret put it, is Servite Associates Around the World. Hopefully I'm not going to bring shame, but that's too much of a task for me to undertake. As a congregation, it's only been the last several years that we have concretely begun to discuss our lay members and work towards common goals of formation and spirituality. I also have a disclaimer. If I happen to use the term associate members, in no way am I using a canonical term, vowed voting members of a religious congregation, simply as a relational term. Though our vows or covenants are different, we do share in community. We lack good terminology in explaining that intimate and life-giving relationship of sisters and associates. I'm using the term and identifying that spiritually we belong to one another. Father John gave us an image of the Servite order being the trunk of a tree. If we continue with this analogy, then our associates are the limb of a branch of this tree that began with this very strong trunk he talked about. He took the image a bit deeper, identifying the roots as the true foundation of the tree, that being Jesus. This indeed is the base of how Christians have been inspired since the beginning of Christianity. Let's see if she can turn a slide. So we'll start with Jesus' time. This is going to be a really long talk because we're starting way back. Throughout all of the history, women and men have been inspired, have been called, and with passion have lived out the gospel. At the time of Jesus, there were many disciples from many walks of life, women and men, diverse, educated, uneducated, fishermen, mothers, widows, sons, carpenters, daughters, fathers and mothers, drawn by a light we call Jesus Christ. Now the good news about this history lesson is we're going to move right along, whoops, or maybe not, to 1233. As Father John shared, in 1233, 7 merchants came together around their commonalities, beliefs, and devotions, and founded the Servite order. They're known to us as the 7 Holy Founders. They are the first group of, actually first and only group of saints that were canonized together, rather than being canonized individually by particular names. So moving right along to 1840 is Marie Guillot, and this is the best I can ever come up with a picture of Marie Guillot, because we don't know what Marie Guillot looked like. There's no pictures or sketchings of her. There are some of the imagination, but this is the front door, or the chapel, the front of the chapel of where our sisters were in Couve, France. So this is the area that she lived in and the place that she prayed. So Marie responded to a call in southern France. Then she invited friends to join her in teaching young village girls that would otherwise not receive an education. So they began a community together, and yet they were not a religious community as of yet. I believe that the formality and structure of how these people came together was far less important than the commonalities in life they shared. Community, prayer, and compassion drew them together. In Jesus' time, at the time of the 7 Holy Founders, and at the time of Marie Guillot, lay people responded to the call. Now we're going to see some really fast movement, Vatican II. So we forward to Vatican II. The windows are opened and the entire body of faith is called to live out their baptismal call, the fundamental element of our faith. Another fast forward, even though it doesn't look like it. The early 1980s of the Servants of Mary, they were women of prayer, community, and hospitality. They invited friends and fellow ministers into a discussion to find ways to collaborate, support, and share their charism as fellow ministers with the church. In 1918, the associate program was put in place, and the sisters accepted their first associates. The evaluation process for these people was slightly sketchy. But nonetheless, 2 women and 1 man from Portland, Oregon became associates. I am humbled and blessed to say that I was one of them. This new relationship between sisters and associates did not focus on formality or structures. It focused on community, prayer, and compassion. The tagline to the program was and is, "We believe in who we are and what we do together." This speaks of a journey, as Val shared earlier, and a mutuality. It also talks about action, ministry. The program quickly grew. In 29 years, over 100 men and women have made a covenant with the Servants of Mary, drawn by the sisters and their charism of compassionate presence as modeled by Mary. So what is an associate? An associate is someone who journeys with our sisters and looks at these 3 elements as they make a covenant with the community. They share with us the values that they hold in common with the Servite community, how they hope to grow and share in community, and then they identify specific experiences that they will share in and with us. Originally, it was how they were going to do that with the sisters, but if we look at ourselves communally, now it's how we're going to do that with both and sisters and associates. Each woman and man have made their own individual promises, how they engage with the Servants of Mary, what he or she holds in common with the community, and how they hope to grow and what they plan on doing, as I said. So we're going to meet just a couple of our associates now. This is the tricky part.
Come to the song, come to the dance, bring all you are, bring all you be, and come with your voice, come with your heart, come and journey with me. Come and journey with me. Come, let the sun fill up your eyes. Take the time to look
So we have associates across the United States. These are our associates from Tucson. I try to work in a smattering of people across the United States. So you saw people from Arizona, from Oregon, from Denver, from Omaha, and then also from New York. And so we now have 84 associates, all who have decided that it is important for them to have a sense of community and be connected to the servants of Mary. So we have a terminology conundrum. And I often fail to find the right terms to use. The church will use some particular terms, but I'm not always so sure that they fit us well. So sometimes we'll talk about people who are not religious or clergy as secular. But when we look at the definition of secular, it tells you who they're not who they are. Then another term that we use is lay person and laity, and the difficulty with this term is, once again, it tells you who they are not who they are. The other piece is that's not a common term in our world today. So when we are talking to people outside of the Catholic Church about laity, it's a foreign word for them as well. So I'll go to my next one, and in regards to community, actually I think this fits us very well, and that is the definition of associate. We see partner, connect, companion. It denotes a sense of belonging to one another. I think this is why I struggle with not using the word member. Though not canonical members, there is a connection through spirituality, call, and a desire to share compassion. This binds us together. This is going to be my really wimpy attempt at addressing the across the world piece. So, in the church we have many titles of groups that would be considered lay people. Many of them are originally from the middle, which is the third order. So clergy is the first order, of course, and then religious life is the second order, and then laity would be considered the third order. So these are terms that are used. We use associates. Secular Institute is a group of people, and that is a group that the Servants of Mary as an order has, and they are people who have taken private vows and choose to live out in the world. Friends, co-journers, companions, those are other words that other communities also use for what we call associates. Oblates would be similar to a third order, as well as a secular order, which is also a Servite group of people. So this third order is based on the spirituality of the religious congregation that they are connected to. But they tend to be separate from the congregation that they belong to, and they have their own rules and ways to meet with one another as a separate entity. I think the gift of our associates is that it is communal, and we do that piece of journeying together and being interconnected. When I was in the Philippines recently for one of our international meetings, Young Professionals was a group that came up. And that's a new group that they have in the Philippines, which are younger people who are interested in a connection with the Servite order, but are not ready to make any kind of formal commitment, and yet want to assist the congregation or the order as they can. When I talked about the fact that we have just recently started talking about formation and the spirituality of an international group of associates, we came into a terminology conundrum about that as well, because associate does not carry the same meaning in all of the different languages. We found that for our sisters in France, associates relates more to a business transaction or people who you're doing business with. So the term collaborators is what they're using for their group of people who are similar to our associate membership. So lest we forget the Vatican II, we have a very nice Pope who has brought it back to the foreground for us. And you can see, hopefully, the connection of the servants of Mary responding to a need and a call that opened the door in a new way. And we're lucky to have Pope Francis, who says, "I urge each of you to recall, as if you were making an interior pilgrimage, the first love with which Lord Jesus Christ warmed your heart, not for the sake of nostalgia, but in order to persevere in joy. The Lord's disciples persevere in joy when they sense His presence, do His will, and share with others their faith, hope, and evangelical charity." That is something that we hold in common with our associates, the sisters do. Francis also sees how formation and service or ministry need to go hand in hand. Though not the formation of the days gone by, for us the root remains the same, to come closer in relationship with Jesus. And as Francis says, we need well-formed lay people, animated by a sincere and clear faith, whose life has been touched by the personal and merciful love of Christ Jesus. My hope is that our associate program continues to develop a strong relationship between our sisters and associates, and together we get our hands dirty, like Pope Francis suggests. We need lay people who take risks, who get their hands dirty, who are not afraid of making mistakes, who go forward. We need lay people with a vision of the future, not confined to the little things of life. The church needs lay people who dare to dream. And I do believe also in programs such as our associate programs, those who come and walk with us help us as sisters to dare to dream as well. I'd like to go back to the original image of the tree. We need always nourish the roots of the tree and remember that the tree serves a purpose. As I prepared this talk, I was struck with a children's story, The Giving Tree. In whatever way possible, the tree was there to be present to a young child who loved the tree, serving many roles throughout the life of the tree, whether offering simple joy through spending time together, offering shade in difficult times, sharing its fruits, offering its very self through its limbs, down to the point of realizing even the stump of the tree had something to offer. Throughout the development of the Servants of Mary, from a seedling all the way to a stump, the tree has been one of service. I believe that this is how each part of our Servite tree has and will continue to respond to the baptismal call. We are bound to each other in this call to compassion, whether it is finding new ways to grow or new ways to share and give. We will always have more to give than we can possibly ever perceive. We just need to be open. After all, God calls and we need to respond. So, I thought we could do a little prayer together. And we would do this in sides. So if these two tables on this side would like to pray the first slide, this group here can pray the second slide and vice versa. This is called the Magnificat of Friendship, which I think reflects very well on what the relationship is between our sisters and associates. My soul
flowers in the light of your love, my God, and my spirit sings hallelujah in the reality of your joyful presence. because you have chosen my kinsfolk and me with the summons of your eyes. Yes, we are known now and for all time. We are known as blessed. Holy is your name. The tenderness of your hand rests on us as we journey in your way. Your power in my life has led me into the embrace of loving arms. You have exposed my lonely pride, that I might turn my head to your nurturing breast. You have revealed the hollowness of achievements and have opened in my heart a space filled with simple loving moments. My hunger you have satisfied, my excess you have ignored. You are my help as I remember your tender love for me. For we have touched each other, you and I, and we have made promises. I remember your tenderness for all that you have begun in me, and in those with whom I walk. And I respond with all that I am becoming in this hour and in all times to come.
Amen. Now, at this time, if anybody has any questions or comments, I am a little humbled in giving this talk by the fact that we have a number of associates here, and this is really about your journey and your experience. And I don't know that I totally did it justice, but hopefully we have peeled it back a little bit for those of you who are not associates or sisters to consider walking with the servants of Mary. Any questions? Val?
Two things. One is, I think canonically, religious sisters are also considered lay people.
Yes, we are. And I actually, as soon as I said that, I thought, gosh, I hope one of the sisters doesn't point that out.
Yeah, I meant we have that in common.
Yes, you're right. We do have that in common. And now it's escaping me what the second order is.
Cloistered.
Cloistered. Okay, thank you.
The other thing is, could you talk a little bit more about the way associates are formed, like the formation program that you designed?
So we have a formation process that we invite people to come to if they're interested in discerning associate membership, and we do see it as a discernment process. We did have formation previously, but this goes a little more in depth and lasts from anywhere to a year and a half. We cover topics such as the history of the servants of Mary, the charism of the servants of Mary, what it is to respond to the baptismal call, and then also different ways that as servants of Mary, we see Mary as a model to us. And we meet in small groups, small faith sharing groups during that time. We invite sisters and associates to join those who are discerning, and really we just spend about an hour and a half praying together and having good conversation. Nancy?
So maybe I misheard, but in the very beginning, the slide with Mary, the Annunciation, you said the associate membership, I heard 1918.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1981, but I'm not sure I heard it right.
I heard that too.
So we
Wow.
really, yeah.
So, Joan, that makes you really old. Joan was the first director of our associate membership. 1989 is when we first started having associates, and we began having the conversation in the early 1980s.
Yeah. I thought maybe the Europeans were way ahead of us.
Well, actually, Mary, in doing her historical research, Sister Mary, for her talk, noted in one of our little books of history that in 1838, there was the first group of associates in England, and it was a group of women who had gone to kind of a vocational schooling to learn some trades in order to be able to be self-sufficient. And they enjoyed so much the peace of being community that once they were ready to advance, they actually started a little grouping of their own. It didn't last a horribly long time, but there's always kind of been that emphasis of how does the laity respond with the sisters? Jenny?
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
Well, I'm just remembering my own beginnings in religious life, which was way back in the early 60s. That was before Vatican II. And at that time, there was a big distinction between laity and religious, between the secular world and the sacred world. That's how we talked about it. And canon law notwithstanding, basically priests and nuns were seen to be in the top realm, the sacred realm, and lay people were all in the secular world. There was no talk about everybody being on the same tree trunk. And when I was a novice, Mother Annunziata was preparing us for our vows. And she said to us one morning, "Now, little girls," those of you who know Mother Annunziata will know what I'm talking about. She said, "Right now, you are part of the secular world." And she said that with a little bit of disdain. But she said in 2 weeks, which was when we were making our vows, the basic message was you're going to get bumped up into the sacred world. And we lived in a dorm at that time. And that night when we were going to bed, Kathy Toko, some of you know her, she tiptoed on over to me and she said, "Hey Ginny, guess what? Your mother is a secular." Fortunately, I think we knew that was kind of a load of coal, but it took a while.
And I think that's the hard part about some of those terms. We talk much more about the secular world as a negative piece now than we ever have before. And so to say that people are secular can be quite insulting, especially when people are based in their, or rooted in their spirituality, and that their movement comes out of that. Joe?
Well, I think also when we were initially a group exploring it, it was that sense of we are in ministry together, we are in spirituality together, we learn so much from wherever we are, whether we're in a parish or in a school, that it's a give and take. And I think that's really what we look more and more as our associate program was membership, was how can we share those gifts with one another. I know personally that I was greatly blessed by the associate, and continue to be by the associates. It's not a case of here and here, but we're in this together.
I think that's very true. It is more about our commonalities than our differences, and we can get really hung up in verbiage that doesn't get us to the root of that. I know for me, being in this position has been a very humbling piece because there's no top down here, boy. If it isn't an evil plane, I feel like sometimes I'm looking up in regards to journeying with our associates because of their deep faith lives and their commitment to their families and their lives, and also the ministries that they do. And the deep rootedness in that sense of hospitality and compassion, which we identify ourselves as, even though we don't use the word hospitality as often. Sister Mary Alice?
I'm glad to hear, I was wondering, where Mary was going to come into the identity of associates, and since Servites, that's very much a part, that's essential to the Servite charism and vocation. So you brought it in on formation, that people do have formation in the charism in relation to Marian compassion, service in the spirit of Mary, and the other would be always, to be a Servite is always to be a servant of others, and you brought that in also in your formation talk, that we serve together. We're a community, but we're really based in those deep gospel values and of the charism from the beginning. If Servite's always associated with a Marian dimension, and certainly always with service. I'm among you as one who serves. So I think that's good, I was waiting to hear, what I was sharing. The community's basing. We heard that in John Fontana, to be a Servite from the beginning was a community member. But Mary was central always to the vocation, not honoring, not worshiping Mary, but inspired by Mary and the Sorrowful Mother.
Thank you, and I really appreciated actually the distinction that Father John gave us when he said that rather than servants of Mary, it should be servants like Mary, and that we take Mary as our model rather than we are serving in the name of Mary, or we are serving just for Mary, we're serving for the church. Carolyn?
The 84 Servants of Mary Associates in the U.S. are men and women, Catholic and non-Catholic or Christian. I was just wondering, and I know your focus isn't the world, but in the other congregations or communities, about how many are there, and are they as diverse, as men and women and Catholic and Christian in those associate programs?
I think when you talk about third order groups or oblates, you're talking about people who are of Catholic faith rather than speaking of just Christianity. I'm not so sure in regards to our sisters in our other communities exactly where that stretches for them. I think that's part of the conversation that we need to have. Even though we have always said we welcome somebody of any Christian faith, actually, most of our associates are Catholic, and so there is that. I was in Messina, which is one of the places that we have a sister and associates, and I was talking to a woman who's a recent associate there, and she was talking about the Presbyterian minister across the street and how she shares information from the Servants of Mary with her. And I said, you do know that you could also invite her to journey with us. And she had forgotten that it's of all Christian faiths. So perhaps we'll be branching out that way a little bit more. I think that would be a wonderful thing if we did, because we have so much diversity to offer one another. Margaret?
I think it's so appropriate, as we celebrate this year our 125 years in the United States, to reflect on just all the lay associations we've had through these 125 years. We've never been like a little self-contained unit, that didn't need people, need other people. We've had so many different wonderful, wonderful people in those 125 years that have walked with us and collaborated in so many different ways. We just could never have gotten this far without all those wonderful relationships. So it's good just to be conscious of that during this anniversary celebration year.
And I think that is one of the most wonderful things about us celebrating this anniversary, is really coming to hear people's stories and that interconnection that we've had from the very beginning when our sisters were first on mission, of the sisters who were deceased and what an impact they made in families and lives, and knowing all of the stories that we've heard of our sisters, of the impact that those very same families and parishes made in their lives in regards to kind of their own formation in the world. Any other questions? So speaking of the 125th, so we were in Messina, and on Monday we celebrated this one there.
Is it red?
Yep.
I could change this real quick. Can
Okay.
you talk loud?
I certainly can.
Oh, good.
So on Monday, we celebrated that anniversary in Messina, New York, which is a very small town in New York. Though it be very small, sisters, raise your hand if you're from there.
Or taught there?
Well, you can raise your hand if you taught there. Messina had a huge impact on our community. We've had a number of sisters that have entered from there, and a number of our sisters actually who went there for their first teaching mission. So a lot of the celebration that happened was actually prepared by the associates, which was very touching to me that they just kind of picked it up and moved it along, because we only have one sister that's there now. In the opening, an associate got up and welcomed everybody and introduced everybody that was there. In the beginning of her introduction, she talked about the servants of Mary, a little separate. By the time she was done talking, she was talking about our mother house in Omaha and our community. And I think that just warmed my heart. She's only been an associate for 9 months, but it just warmed my heart, that fact of, even though we're so spread apart, how integral this entire community feels to her. I also think we've had some wonderful ways that our associates have wanted to help us celebrate. So I have some visual aids.
Testing, yeah.
And creative ways of celebrating. These are our associates in Portland, Oregon, who decided that they would make themselves and their community representative of 125 years. So that's all of their photos over the years. And when we came back from Messina the other day, I found a large box in my office. And we have an associate who originally was from Kearney and was probably only an associate for 2 years before she moved to Nevada. So now she's moving between Nevada and South Dakota. And when we announced the 125 years, she wrote to me and she said, I want to be able to celebrate in some way. And one thing I would like to do, she's a wonderful quilter. She wanted to make, well, she said banners in the beginning, and said, would you send me some of your historical pictures of the sisters? So in this big box, not banners, but a large quilt.
It's upside down. It's upside down.
Well, just look at it upside down. See if you recognize people. So we'll hopefully hang this someplace of prominence for a while. But I was just very touched that even though she's very isolated, she felt that there had to be some way that she could connect with us during this anniversary, because she doesn't live among any other associates or sisters. Sure. And her name is Arlene Anderson. Now, you don't have to be crafty to be an associate. There's always a fondness of mine, though, if you are.
Liz and I are shaking our heads, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, in ending, we've talked about compassion, and I have this little song that I thought after you hear it a couple of times you might want to sing it in closing. It's called Circle of Compassion. It's more like a mantra. So thank you very much. I think I'd also like to just mention that the background of this slide is actually the artwork of Sister Barbara Tripp, who was one of our sisters who passed away, gosh, probably 20 years ago. And she loved painting in oils. So it's much brighter originally, but I kind of dimmed it a little so that we could use it for the slide. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful, and we appreciate all that you put into it. Thank you.